And yet again, another episode of Jeeping with Cool Guy. Let's tear apart some stuff. On today's episode of Jeeping with Cool Guy, we're going to take out the Dana 20. This is the transfer case on, I believe it's 76 through 80. I think in 81, it's either 81 or 82, they switched over to the Dana 300. I don't really know which is better. I do know that without an adapter, the Dana 20 goes with the T150, and I think it's the T174. So the T150 is the heavy-duty 3-speed transmission that came from that was back in the CJ5s, and so for the CJ7s it was 76 to 80, 81 maybe, give or take, and then in 82 they offered the lighter duty T4 and the T5s, which is a 4-speed and a 5-speed. But those are actually light-duty truck transmissions. The T150 and the T174, I believe it's T174, are medium to heavy duty. So you only have 3 speeds, but it's also seriously geared. The Dana 20 is engineered to operate with that. So I'm assuming that the Dana 20 is a more durable transfer case, but I don't think there's really a whole lot of difference between the two. I could be wrong, it's irrelevant. So we're going to take this off today. First thing you need to do is drain this sucker out. There is a drainage port right underneath the transfer case with the drip pan, or not the drip pan, but the skid plate. Actually, while I'm thinking about it, let me talk about the skid plate. There are 2 skid plates that go with the Jeep transmissions. And they're not interchangeable. So if you have a T150 or a Dana, if you have a Dana 20 transfer case, you're going to need a skid plate from 76 to 81, whatever that may be. And that is all dependent on where the transfer case mount thing right down there actually is located. Otherwise you're going to have to drill holes and do all kinds of other things. So that's one thing to take note of, and it's also another way to tell what kind of transfer case you have, what kind of transmission you have, and what kind of skid plate you need to replace it with. This one is toast. Looking at the transfer case from the rear of the vehicle, as you can see, there is the drain port through the skid plate right here. All you need is a 3/8 inch socket. Well, actually not, a socket like a drive. You could use a breaker bar, you could use a regular 3/8 wrench, and all you need to do is just back it out. There's a lot of fluid in here, so make sure that you have a good drip pan underneath. Along with your 3/8 inch spindle wrench, you're probably going to need an extender, just because there's a fairly, I don't know, 1.5 inch gap between the skid plate and the transfer case, and you really can't get to it very easily. So pop that in. Once you pull it out, make sure you have a good drain pan under here. Because I don't know how many quarts in here. I'm going to guess it's probably somewhere around 3 quarts. I'll have to look at the owner's manual. But that's irrelevant right now. The main point is that there are some things that the previous owners had taken very good care of this. Even though the rest of it is completely dilapidated and at an almost complete loss. When I drained the gear oil out about, I don't know, 2 minutes ago, it was really clear. So that was very relieving to see, because if you watch my video on the Dana 300 transfer case removal, the gear oil that came out of that thing smelled like a swamp. Oh my God, it was so bad. So I'm kind of excited that I may not have to rebuild this thing. It may just be a seal replacement, and we should be good to go. But we'll get this all shined up. Anyways, so let's take this thing off. There's only a few bolts. This thing's really easy to access. There's a bolt here, a bolt right in the top main back, and then there's, I think, 3 bolts around this side. So let's get to taking that off real quick. I've previously spoken that the transfer case is actually mounted to the skid plate. That's not the case. The transmission, hence the transmission mount right down there, is actually mounted to the skid plate. The reason I'm bringing that up is because I was just going to say that you need to take the skid plate off from the transmission mount and the frame before you drop off the transfer case. But that's not the case, so let's move on. There are a total of 5 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They are all 9/16. Previously, when I took off the Dana 300 on the other Jeep, this thing is not light. This thing weighs a freaking ton. I'm going to go with probably 75, 80 pounds. So when you drop this thing off, you might want to have something wedged underneath it, so have somebody help you hold it up, because this thing is not light. Be careful. All right, so let's take these things off. The only reason I can assume that these are coming off as easy as they are, because I'm pretty sure that this has never been taken off of this transmission, is that this thing just leaks all over the place. So I'm assuming that the lubrication has made this a lot easier. AMC gave us just enough room to get a standard wrench in here, and that's pretty much about it. You can't get a ratcheting wrench, anything in here. This is just a standard wrench, and that's about it. Once you get loosened up, it comes out pretty easily though. Alright, once you get those loosened up, you can take them off with an impact wrench. I didn't want to do this with initially because, you know, if there was some problem in here and these things were seized up a little bit, the last thing I'd want to do is snap off a bolt inside of a transfer case. So I'm going to leave that top middle one as kind of the retainer. Ooh, we be leaking. Huh. I'm assuming that the actual transmission is leaking the rest of the fluid out into the transfer case and the transfer case out. So I'm going to let this drain for a second. Alright, all the bolts are out except for this top one, and then I realized, I could have got myself in a lot of trouble here. I have not disconnected the front drive shaft yet. That actually comes out of the transfer case. So you need to disconnect, obviously, your front drive shaft. This consists of 2 clamp brackets that go around the universal joint on the drive shaft. So you just remove these. These are 1 or 1/2 inch. Just discovered something else. This thing's free turning. So unless you have your locking hubs engaged, which I don't, and you have this in gear, which I don't, actually I don't even know if that would affect it at all, you're going to have to find some way of keeping this drive shaft from spinning. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wedge a pry bar in here so that the drive shaft doesn't rotate. Alright, now once you get the nut off, the lock washer, these things actually should just come out very easily. And that's all they are. 1 on each side of the universal joint. Then you can disconnect the drive shaft. One could disconnect the drive shaft. Since they're collapsible, there you go. Now you're offset. Drive shaft is disconnected. Alright, let's take off the transfer case now. Before you do this, I would recommend having a game plan. My game plan is that I'm going to have a rubber mallet that I'm just going to knock this thing and break the seal from the gasket between the transfer case and the transmission. And then once that is broken, then I'm going to lift it off and I'm going to bring it back and put it right on this thing. I don't know how much fluid is going to come out of here. I don't want to rest it on this skid plate because the skid plate is toast. And there's only 1 bolt, maybe 2 that's holding it in, and I don't even quite sure how strong they are. So just make sure you have a game plan. You don't want to get yourself stuck with 75, 80 pounds sitting right underneath your knuckles. That's not fun. Just realized before I take this thing off, I've actually disconnected this top bolt. This one right here, this outer lying one that was part of the 5 that we took off, you don't need to take this off because this thing's actually the facing plate for the transfer case into the gear housing. So I put this one back on. Just wanted to let you know. Oh, man. Alright, now that I'm standing over it, right in the middle of the transfer case, underneath the transmission, is another bolt. I don't know how I'm going to get to that one. That one's, okay, that sucks. Alright, let me try and figure that one out. Alright, I was able to use one of these and get it on there pretty close. Enough to where it made me a little nervous that I might strip it out, but somebody may have put this in before and didn't put any tension on it. So I mean, it was like 5 foot-pounds, 10 foot-pounds maybe. So it actually came off fairly easily using that. Couldn't get this in there, too small, wrong angle. Even tried one of these. I couldn't get this thing past the spindle drive, or the spindle nut, I can't remember what these things are called, for the actual end of the transfer case that connects to the drive shaft. Anyways, so I was able to get that. I still got to back it out a little bit more. Hopefully that's the last bolt. Okay, so let's do this. I can already see that there's separation between the transfer case and the transmission. Get a good grip. Actually, that's not as heavy as the Dana 30 or 300. That's not bad. This is the rear drive or the rear gears coming out of the T150. The T5, which is in the other Jeep. See in my other videos for that. Didn't have this. You can see how it totally interacts with or meshes with the gears inside of the Dana 300 or the Dana 20. Gotta stop that. Dana 20, T150. Alright, pay attention to the next in the series, or whatever comes about, for when I take off the T150 and get rid of this disgusting mess.